In April of 2017, Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Work signed a memo establishing the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team, codenamed Project Maven, with the goal of integrating commercial AI into military operations. In this episode, I'm going to try to answer why and how AI is being used by the military, who is making billions as Pentagon AI contractors, and trying to answer the ethical question, just because we can use AI in warfare, does that mean we should? Well, I can't know for sure. I think a large portion of the public wasn't aware AI was already being actively used by the military until NBC broke the story about Project Maven being deployed to plan the Iran bombing. With that out of the way, I think it's best to start with what AI technology is actually being used by the US military. This is far from a comprehensive list, but it does cover most common applications of the technology. The first three use cases will seem pretty intuitive, pretty routine, and frankly, logical. Last two may make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. First, AI is being used for training, specifically where simulations are particularly helpful. This includes combat simulation, warfare analysis, and sensor simulation to train soldiers and familiarize them with operations and systems. This simulation capability is also being used in the development of new ships and jets. Second, logistics and sustainment operations utilize AI models to help the military run predictive models, forecasting supply needs, establishing resupply schedules to deliver fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, food, and more. AI optimizes delivery down to the preferred route based on real-time data regarding weather, terrain, and hostile threats. Third, as you can imagine, AI and equipment that relies on high bandwidth connectivity between locations or even devices are not always feasible, so the US military contracted with Turbine One to develop systems that allow soldiers to process battlefield data on self-contained devices. This means soldiers in the field don't need a connection to a command center for operation. This is important because it opens the door for more autonomous decision-making outside of traditional chains of command. Fourth, Maven's user interface, called the Maven Smart System, can display aircraft movements, logistics, locations of key personnel, ships, and no-strike zones, and can transmit a human decision to fire weapons directly to weapon systems. Yellow outlined boxes indicate potential targets, blue indicates friendly forces. One crucial note here, Maven requires human authorization to fire weapons. It does not make that decision autonomously. This is what the military refers to as target recognition and kill chain compression. Fifth, in 2025, the DoD allocated $4.9 billion specifically for AI research and development, with a heavy focus on autonomous systems and unmanned aerial and ground vehicles for reconnaissance and tactical support. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, quote, in addition to surveillance and targeting, the military is investing heavily in the development of autonomous weapons, which can select targets and take lethal action with varying degrees of human involvement. According to the U.S. military's own website, there is now a new officer career pathway, the 49B AI ML officer, with the first class of officers being reclassified this year. These specialists will be responsible for accelerating battlefield decision-making, streamlining logistics, and supporting robotics and autonomous systems. The Army has created an entirely new career path to support the operation and expansion of AI technology by the U.S. military. You know, one of the best ways to support small YouTube channels like mine is to subscribe. If you like the content and you'd like to see more of it, consider subscribing. Back to the episode. And this is not merely a philosophical application of these technologies. According to what the Pentagon has shared publicly, most of these systems have been actively and thoroughly utilized leading up to the initial bombing of Iran throughout the first 5 weeks of this war. Specifically, Palantir's Maven Smart System was used for Iranian target identification and prioritization. Anthropic's Claude was used inside of Project Maven to assist with that target prioritization, as well as analyzing those targets in real time. The CENTCOM commander said the military was using, quote, a variety of sophisticated AI tools without going into much detail, but did openly confirm the use of AI in the conflict. Palantir's Maven system allowed the U.S. military to target and hit around 1,000 targets in the first 24 hours. The truth is, war is an incredibly lucrative business for suppliers and contractors. These AI suppliers are making billions. Up until recently, almost the entirety of the defense contracting space has been dominated by what are called primes. No, this isn't a Transformers reference. Primes, or prime contractors, are the major contractors hired by the DoD to deliver weapon systems, ammunition, planes, equipment, you name it. Most people think of 5 specific companies as the primes: Lockheed Martin, RTX, formerly known as Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman. There are thousands of subcontractors working for these primes. In fact, Northrop Grumman alone is believed to have 20,000 subcontractors under its prime umbrella. But things are changing. AI companies are now signing contracts directly with the DoD, and the big primes are being left on the sidelines. The name Palmer Luckey may be familiar to you. He became famous as the 19-year-old who founded Oculus VR in his parents' garage, later selling it to Facebook for $2 billion in 2014. In 2017, he co-founded Anduril, a startup that was going to revolutionize the way defense contractors operated. Historically, defense contractors would win a DoD contract, have their R&D funded through that contract via federal tax revenue, and then deliver that product. Taking pages from the Silicon Valley venture playbook, Luckey believed it would be better to raise a bunch of money, self-fund the research and development, building what he believed the military wanted, and then selling that to the DoD. This approach allowed Anduril to develop solutions much faster and retain the intellectual property rights to the technology it developed. And so far, he's been right. In 2025, Anduril recorded its highest annual revenue to date, $912 million, and investors are clamoring to get a piece of it. According to the BBN Times, in March of this year, Anduril was reported to be raising a $4 billion funding round led by Andreessen Horowitz and Thrive Capital at a post-money valuation of $60 billion, nearly doubling its $30.5 billion valuation from just 9 months earlier. A $60 billion valuation would make Anduril more valuable than many of the Fortune 500 companies. Palantir is one of the most influential AI company suppliers to the United States government. I'd bet that most Americans have never heard of them. Not my subscribers, of course, they know what's up. But for everyone else, the Cliff Notes version is that Palantir has built multiple products for the US government that do everything from tracking the movements of illegal immigrants to providing mass data aggregation to the US military. Palantir then turns that data aggregation into assessments of everything from logistical bottlenecks to potential security threats, both foreign and domestic. You can think of them as the data and AI backbone for the US military. And Palantir's technology has its fingers in almost every facet of the military's AI operations, including the Maven Smart System it took over when Google walked away from the contract. Maven Smart Systems is now the intelligence platform for U.S. Army intelligence, joint all-domain command and control. Side note, one of Palantir's first investors was the Central Intelligence Agency. Yep, the US CIA. Most people don't even know the CIA has an investment program. By the end of 2026, the U.S. military will have committed to spending more than $32 billion on AI projects, equipment, and services. In mid-2025, the U.S. Army awarded Palantir an enterprise service agreement valued at up to $10 billion over 10 years, consolidating 75 previously separate contracts into a single massive vehicle. Anduril wasn't left out in the cold either. In March of 2026, the Army announced an even larger deal with the company, a 5 to 10-year enterprise contract worth as much as $20 billion. Anduril and Palantir are also jointly competing to write the software behind the Golden Dome missile defense shield, a contract that's estimated to be worth $185 billion. Palantir recently became the first software company to serve as the lead prime contractor on a battlefield system, a role previously held by only a handful of giants, with the last new prime contractor emerging over 70 years ago. So these companies are well capitalized. They're fully integrated as defense contractors and provide frontier technologies that create unrivaled battlefield capability for the U.S. military. But has this rewritten our definition of ethical and moral combat? I'm going to try to tread lightly here because all of this leads back to military conflict, presumably with many of those conflicts delivering lethal consequences. Admittedly, this is subject matter that's more consequential than what I normally cover on this channel, but I think it's important to understand the arguments for and against using this technology for military operations. I certainly have an opinion on all of this, but ultimately, I want you to draw your own conclusions. I'll start with the argument that AI is making our military more efficient, more secure, and more capable, because there's real truth in that. First, AI systems allow the U.S. military to deploy resources, supplies, and support to operations across the globe. Defense Logistics Agency troop support is responsible for $14 to $25 billion worth of subsistence and related support every year. In layman's terms, They have to move $25 billion worth of basic food and supplies around the globe every year. Second, the Pentagon's own AI strategy memo states explicitly that, quote, the risks of not moving fast enough outweigh the risks of imperfect alignment, end quote, and frames 2026 as the year the U.S. will, quote, emphatically raise the bar for military AI dominance. Third, Anduril's Lucky and others believe U.S. adversaries look at these enhanced AI technologies wielded by the U.S. military as a deterrent, that those wanting to engage the military will be discouraged from following through. If this sounds reminiscent of the Cold War deterrence arguments, it is, just slightly repurposed. Lastly, other countries like China are aggressively developing their own military AI capabilities, and the U.S. simply cannot get left behind. Space Force commanders specifically cite what they believe to be Russian, quote, counter space technologies that could directly threaten the United States. But then there are also real questions to answer. Who's accountable? Academics often call this the responsibility gap, a situation where autonomous systems decouple lethal actions from human agency, creating conditions where harm occurs without identifiable moral guidelines. The resulting accountability vacuum means violations of international humanitarian law become procedurally unavoidable and legally unpunishable. Given the Pentagon's internal messaging that, quote, the risks of not moving fast enough outweigh the risks of imperfect alignment, show how speed and readiness are potentially prioritized over safety and restraint. Human Rights Watch asserts that AI targeting systems reflect the biases of their developers, are often built using incomplete data, and are technically incapable of showing how or on what basis targeting decisions are made, which limits the possibility of remedy or accountability when something goes wrong. Because of these consequences and the stakes involved in all of this, I have some questions. Do we know how these AI systems actually work? The short answer appears to be no. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, the Army itself warned that a battlefield communication system designed by Palantir and Anduril was, quote, a black box, that it makes it impossible to tell whether unauthorized users can access its applications and data. The company that builds the system cannot or will not fully explain how it works, but the military is deploying it regardless. What's the oversight look like? In 2025, President Trump revoked the Obama-era executive order that had imposed ethical guidelines on AI applications, replacing it with one explicitly focused on removing barriers to American AI dominance. That policy shift, according to the Belfer Center for Science, combined with congressional inaction, means the rules governing military AI are essentially being written by the companies being paid to build it. In case you're starting to zone out, lock back in for a second because this is from the U.S. Congress's own website, and this shouldn't be glazed over. U.S. policy does not prohibit the development or employment of lethal autonomous weapon systems. Senior DoD officials have not publicly confirmed whether such systems are already being developed, but have stated the U.S. may be compelled to develop them if other countries choose to do so. In 2023, 164 nations backed a UN General Assembly resolution calling for governance of autonomous weapon systems. A follow-up resolution in 2024 received support from 166 nations. 3 major military powers continued to resist binding restrictions that would constrain their use of AI for military operations. Those 3 countries: China, Russia, and the United States. So we have the world's most powerful military using the world's most powerful new technology. There's questionable oversight, limited laws or rules regulating its use, the lives of soldiers and civilians at stake, and Congress, the Pentagon, and military brass all seem perfectly comfortable deploying this emerging frontier technology, replacing centuries of human reasoning, human morality, and human judgment. While it does make me feel slightly better knowing actual fire and kill commands have not yet been relegated to AI agents and LLMs, it's still chilling to hear the Pentagon is not categorically and explicitly prohibiting the development of fully autonomous AI action, autonomous actions that could include ending human life. Which is the lesser of 2 evils? Is it now an imperative to deploy military AI to increase speed, U.S. soldier safety and capability, keeping up with other nations that are already developing these technologies and pose potential threats to the U.S.? Or does this rise in AI usage by lethal forces create an existential threat to our humanity? Could both things be true at the same time? Let me know what you think in the comments. That's all for this episode. As always, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.